and some other places. So nice to see that you're all cozy and warm and installed, well installed in your own homes. And welcome to the second of 4 in the series. And so my name's Kirsten Johnson, and I am the president of CAPE. And I've been asked to moderate or facilitate this session, and I'm not going to take a lot of time talking about myself because we have 3 really excellent speakers. And what we've decided to do is allow each of them to have about 25 minutes, about a third of the session each. We've got a really neat format for you that's quite interactive. And so what I'm going to do is just talk a little bit about the rules. Each of our guest speakers are going to be presenting just for a short amount of time. They'll screen share their screen and then present some slides. And then what we'll do is we'll go into sort of a question period. And, you know, I understand from Doug St. Clair, thank you very much for organizing this, that not everybody was able to attend the session last week, but instead of going around and doing lengthy introductions, what we'll do is each of the speakers will introduce themselves. And then if you have a question or once you're participating, if you could just say your name and maybe where you're from, and that way we'll get familiar with everybody and all the faces instead of doing a whole big round of introductions again. So in terms of being interactive, if I don't see you raise your hand like this, you can put your hand up in, there's a reactions button at the bottom of your screen, and you can just click on that, and there's a hand that you can put up, and I'll see that in the side, or you can put your question in the chat, and I'm happy to read it out if that's easier for you. So we're going to try and do it that way, and I'm just going to share my screen for the first 2 housekeeping slides. And here they are. So I basically this session is on leadership in COVID, and it's going to go for an hour and a half. And as I said, we have 3 great speakers, Dr. Eddie Lang, Dr. Carolyn Snyder, and Dr. Taslim Nimji. And none of us, except for Eddie, have any disclosures. Eddie says that all honoraria from industry-sponsored educational activities are directed to support EM trainee research through the Calgary Health Foundation or the CAPE Advancement Fund. So perhaps Eddie does get something for his time and wisdom as he imparts it with others. And so on to the objectives for this session. And today, the virtual leadership series session 2 objectives are that you will be able to glean priority issues relevant to your teams when faced with a major crisis or threat, such as the pandemic and its impact on EDs. You'll be able to develop strategies and action plans to optimize outcomes related to those issues, and you'll be able to seize unique opportunities associated with a major crisis and threat to develop and drive a leadership agenda with a local and wider healthcare, within a local and wider healthcare system. So I feel like this is a very, very, very timely event, as our colleagues in Ontario face this crisis that's really insurmountable, it seems, almost at this time. And you know, I know that numbers are also increasing in other parts of the country, and I know that we're all facing some level of fatigue, and that this is really taking a lot of courage. So I'll pass it over to our first speaker right away, and we can get right into it, Dr. Taslim Nimji. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kirsten. Welcome, everybody. It's a real pleasure and an honor to be here with you today. My name is Taslim, and I'm an emerge physician from Humber River Hospital in Toronto, Ontario. I haven't met many of you, but I look forward to our discussion, and we'll try to keep the slides short so we can get to that more exciting part where we get to really sort of converse with one another. Just sort of to give you a bit of my background. So I've been practicing emergency medicine for about 13 years. And I've always sort of had one foot on the administration side and one foot in the clinical side. And so I've done sort of some work as deputy and interim chief of the department, but my sort of passion lies in health innovation, and I'm the Senior Director of Medical Innovation at Humber. And so I've done a lot of work in that area. And then sort of came on as the hospital's pandemic lead, the physician lead for our pandemic response. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about is certainly relevant to emergency medicine, but also has a bit of that organization lens, because that was sort of the hat that I was asked to wear for COVID. So with that, I'm going to just share my slides to sort of launch us into a bit of discussion here.
I should mention two things. Sorry, we didn't do a land recognition, so I'm just like to recognize the land that I'm sitting on, which is Jugjahay in Montreal, and I appreciate the fact that I'm allowed to present this to you today from Montreal. And also, if you could please mute your microphones if you are not speaking. Thank you.
And I'm just going to make sure you're getting the right slide view. Carolyn, can you give me a thumbs up if you're looking at the right? Yeah. Okay, perfect. We're good to go. So I'm going to sort of take this as it's worth a pause and really sort of start this this sort of brief slide presentation around stepping back when everything is flying at you and how to sort of organize yourself internally as a leader so that you can then externally present the leadership that you want to and model it. Just to give you a very brief background of where I'm coming from at Humber, this is a very busy slide, but really all you need to see is the color. And if you see the darkest blue, that's where the most COVID activity is happening. And if you see the red dot, that's where our hospital is located. So we are certainly a hot spot. And I put this slide in really to show you, if you go to the fourth bar over, which is our hospital, the black bar is our 48-bed ICU, and then the projections on top to April 18th, and then the speckled part to April the 30th of where we anticipate ICU projections. So we are currently taking our 48-bed ICU and ready to go to 80 beds as of Monday, which means leveraging every resource within the hospital and beyond to make that happen. So you can imagine sort of the amount of energy invested in doing that. And of course, while this is a slide that presents ICU, as everybody on this call well knows, the ED is the way that they get there. That's the entry, and that's us in our reality. And this is a slide just to show you a little bit about the activity. So in Ontario, we have an IMS structure that allows us to sort of transfer patients around the province, which was something that was developed in Wave 2 to try to balance some of that COVID activity to support the hotspot hospitals. And you can see Humber River on the top line, that is one of the largest users of this system as we transport patients to other hospitals just to be able to manage the volume coming in the front door. So with that, let's pivot to leadership. So how do you model certainty when you yourself aren't feeling so certain? So if we take ourselves back to March and April of last year, there were so many questions, and for all of us as leaders, we didn't have the answers. And I think what's important is that this isn't about modeling certainty, but it is about a deliberate display of confidence. And that confidence that you're displaying is not confidence in your own leadership, although that is certainly a part of it because you want to ensure that is seen, but it's confidence in your team and confidence in your organization. And so I think that is a key place to start. And that's been my experience, so that the people that you are leading see one cohesive response to the challenge or the crisis that they're about to enter and engage with. And I think that as a first step really helps to put trust from that team in you and you in them, because that relationship is crucial to get through to the other side. And then you think of what's coming at you. This is where I can recall so many differing opinions, and also so much anxiety. And everybody experiences fear and uncertainty and insecurity in a different way. And what I wanted to present here is that you have to start each of those engagements with anybody within your team from the premise that you and them come from a different context. And everything about that context is what's leading to that engagement that you're having with that individual in that moment. Because one person's anxiety might be driven by something very different than yours. And you may be feeling very calm and secure with something, and somebody else comes at you with a whole load of uncertainty in that situation. And if you come at this with, I need to get you to where I'm at without understanding why you're where you are. You won't get there. And so we saw individuals that were dealing with real fears about what this would mean for their children if they were going to go in and be one of the first people to intubate a patient presenting with COVID. And I can tell you that I did one of the first COVID intubations at our hospital. And when I stepped out of that room, and that was, first of all, the most hypoxic I think I've ever let a patient get during an intubation. And when I stepped out of that room, two of the ED docs were watching through the glass door and said, "What were you thinking about? Were you going through the algorithm? What were you thinking?" And I said, "I was thinking about two things as I put that tube in, and I was thinking about my 9-year-old and my 6-year-old." And that's the truth, right? Like, that's what we were all thinking about. We were thinking about our families. And I think it certainly doesn't make you a weaker clinician to answer in that way, and it doesn't make you a weaker leader to answer in that way. I think what it does is models empathy, and it models connection, that we're all dealing with that uncertainty. We're all dealing with thinking about our family. There's people that entered this really concerned about financial strain, as we saw volumes plummet in emergency departments in wave 1, when people were really afraid and didn't come in. There were people dealing with their own personal mental health challenges or those of their families. And so, while you're dealing with, the arguments around, I want an N95, not a surgical mask for every patient encounter, or, I want minimal physical exam, and do I really need to auscultate to every patient that comes in that could be potentially COVID? Or, I want, this algorithm for intubation versus that one. I think you need to start from this premise. And if you do, that will lead to much more successful engagements as you go through that. And then the next thing is about chaos. And this is when I mentioned, that fast rate at which everything is coming at you. And I think that it's only chaos until you put a frame around it. And you need frameworks to start organizing that chaos internally for yourself as a leader, and also to start organizing things for your department so that you can put forward the protocols and procedures that so many of you would have already done for your departments. And I think what I saw here was that there are leaders within your group, and if you watch for them, you'll see them. They will rise. And when you're feeling overwhelmed, if you don't ask for them, they may not know that you're feeling overwhelmed and may not offer their help. And so if you're able to bucket the bits of work that are, or the projects, the little mini projects that are rapidly developing as you're trying to put a frame around all of the work that you need to do, it makes it far easier to start deputizing people within your department to help be leads on each of those buckets, to then come to some sort of larger organizational frame as you work through it. And here I would say, embrace the unconventional thinkers. And I add to that the what's been termed disruptive physicians. Those people that sort of come up with the idea that seems, bonkers or ludicrous, or really are pushing hard, are often people that are divergent thinkers. And divergent thinkers have a lot to offer, especially in a crisis, because in a crisis, that's when you need to leverage unconventional responses to a problem. And so I think that one of the sort of instinctive responses when you're leading and you are feeling overwhelmed, which I think every leader would have been feeling at the beginning of wave 1, and I can say continues to feel, I certainly do in the position that we're in right now in wave 3 in Ontario, is that your instinct is to actually put up a wall to actually sort of silence those voices, because they tend to be loud, and it takes a lot of work to start thinking a different way than a way that you've always thought, or to approach a problem unconventionally. But that's often where the really sort of that diamond in the rough in terms of solutions can lie. So I would say, it's important to keep an open mind and actually create space for people that present in this way at your department meetings and when you're doing your brainstorming work. So now to get to some nitty gritty, is identifying your key priorities when you start. And these should be very few, right? And so what I thought was interesting here is, there we go, they're all there, was staff safety came before patient safety. And I don't know that I've seen that in this way at any other time in my career. And so this was understanding, what do we need to do to ensure that not just that staff are safe, but feel safe. And those two things aren't necessarily the same. And so really listening to your groups to understand what it is that they need to feel safe, and then more importantly, why it is that they feel they need those things to feel safe, to then come out to the end to what is it that we all agree on that we need to put in place. And the same thing would have been true for the patient safety piece. And then ultimately that last picture is meant to really show the transparent communication and the consistent communication that is then necessary for all of the protocols that are being developed and the work that is happening in the background to get to that end goal. And, we did things like, daily calls at 4 o'clock, and if some days nobody showed up and you'd sit on the line for an hour and you'd just be doing work, and other days, 30 people would show up. But they knew that if they had something that they wanted to bring up, they could jump on a daily call at 4 o'clock to raise it. And so ensuring that those lines of communication were open and always there and dependable, I think is really key, because that helps to bring down that level of anxiety within the group. And it also helps to build trust. And then over time, you don't need to have a daily 4 o'clock call. But I think in the beginning, putting up as many of those opportunities goes a long way. And so I realize I'm motoring through these because I really want to give you all an opportunity to sort of have a discussion. I'm going to show you two things. And what I'd like to talk about very briefly is something called liberating structures. This is something that, that those of you haven't heard of, it's worth a Google. And so liberating structures are really structures that you can use to apply to problem solving. They're heavily used for people that do scrums and are engaged in agile iterations, in software development and design, but used in many other industries as well. And there's two examples up here. One is a TRIZ and one is MinSpecs. So I'm actually going to start with MinSpecs. MinSpecs is exactly as it sounds. It's minimum specifications. People use these in product design, but I find that it's really, really useful when you're trying to lead a group and you're trying to land on solutions. And this is really asking the question is, what do we all agree on? Because there's going to be a bunch of stuff that we all don't agree on, but let's determine what we all agree on. And then let's start from there. Do we all agree that staff safety is our number one guiding principle in any protocol that we establish for the emergency department? If yes, then as we're working through our protocols, as we're working through our problem solving, we always come back to our 3 or 5 min specs to ensure that any solutions we're coming up with align with those min specs. And this is a very sort of simple exercise that you can actually do with a group where you just, let everybody raise their ideas, and then you start removing the stuff to say, okay, let's refine that till you get to our 3 or 5 minimum specs for our wave 1 preparation. And then a TRIZ is actually, it's a Russian word, so the acronym won't make sense, but this is where we talk about what must we stop doing to make progress on our deepest purpose. And so this is actually, if you translate it, it's the theory of inventive problem solving. And I find the best way to use this tool is to say, what do we need to do to get to the opposite end state of where we want to go? So I'm going to use an example that's non-pandemic related. And this is when we actually rolled out our mobile and our EMR in the emergency department. So we moved to CPOE and physician documentation fully online, and it was meant to be a mobile solution. And there was a ton of anxiety around this in the emerge. People were worried about what it would do to PIA times, that it would slow down our ability to get to our patients and care for them, and would take away time at the bedside. And so what I did was sort of lead an exercise with our group where I said, what do we have to do to ensure that this implementation fails, that it is the worst implementation ever? And everybody came up with a gazillion ideas. And then we started working backwards to say, okay, what do we need to then do to ensure that we don't do all of these, 100 things that we've identified would ensure our failure? So this is a bit of a sketch that I just did quickly before jumping on this. And this is, if I was to say, what do we need to do to ensure we have a lack of staff solidarity or cohesion in our group? And you would, get the group to throw things out like, ensure that people feel isolated, ensure that we don't give people opportunities to communicate with one another or with the group. Ensure that that the number of staff cases in an outbreak aren't shared and kept secret so that people aren't fully informed. And you would go about this activity, about this exercise in this way, and then you would go down to each of these items that are defined and say, okay, what do we need to do to fix that problem right there, to actually work to ensuring solidarity? And I think it's an interesting way to attack or approach problems, because generally we always approach problems by saying, what do we need to do to ensure success? Not what do we need to do to ensure failure, and working backwards. And I think you'll find some really creative solutions that come up from attacking things this way. So now I'm going to end with this, enough with the cookies. And this is, I would sit at our IMS every morning in wave one. And one of the sort of end bits that we would talk about was physician wellness. And it would be like, today we're offering free cookies and today we're giving a Tim's card. And I kept thinking, like, I don't think that this is what our physicians need. They need strong leadership. There's no doubt about it. And the things that I was talking about, but they also need community. They need each other. And they've been forced into this world where we lived in a very high touch proximity world, and we've been forced into an at distance world. We can't come together for our meetings. We can't come together in the line at the coffee machine, at the coffee shop, because it's closed and is open for like an hour a day if you want to get a coffee. We can't come together at our meetings in the way that we used to. And so we came up with something called the Humber Minute. Initially, it was me literally running around with a camera, and has now become this organization-wide initiative. And I'm going to show you one of our Humber Minutes, and I'm going to end with that and that open discussion. So I hope this will work. Let's see if it does. Might take a second to play. Oh, hold on. There we go.
Two months in, I'd say I'm still quite worried about the uncertainty. There's a lot about this virus we still don't know. All these mathematical models telling us, when the quarantine is going to be over, if we're going to have a second or third surge. I think, nobody really knows, and it's humbling. The cheesy answer is probably the real answer. It would be my family, my nephews, chasing them around. I would lie, though, if I didn't say I didn't miss sports right now. Dr. Marco Urak, I think just, watching him work just tirelessly to try to prepare our emergency team in terms of running simulations, organizing our website, helping out with our protected code blue and intubation protocols, all doing that while he has a newborn at home, just kind of, I guess, shows me how dedicated he is to helping the rest of us.
And so I'm going to stop sharing here. And so this is what we did. We put out these videos and we tried to create community in a way that we had never done before, and it just took off. And I think what I would say is, by doing something like that, and by showing that you care, your EQ will drive you to a place of success in leadership far greater than your IQ will. At least that's been my experience.
Thank you so much, Tasleem. That was great. I'm just going to ask our other two facilitators, Eddie and Carolyn, if they have anything to add, and then we can jump into questions. You can post them in the chat. By the way, some feedbacks from Lisa Fisher says that she loves the Humber Minute way better than cookies, although she likes cookies. So Eddie, do you have anything to add?
I'll leave it to the questions.
Okay, and Carolyn?
No, I just, I think I will be sort of building upon some of the wellness pieces as well, and truly appreciated and love that Humber Minute as well. I think one of the things I commented on, I was writing notes that I thought I could speak to. I really appreciated and found that it worked well for us, especially in wave one, the idea that you deputize leads. I think in those moments of uncertainty, there are so many, everybody's looking for some way to have some sort of control over the situation, because none of us had any control. And I think we all knew that, but as emergency physicians and anyone working in emergency care, and probably frankly everybody, a lack of control is an incredibly uncomfortable feeling. That's why we train so long. That's why we have all of our protocols. That's why we have ATLS still. Like, we have a system, we have a flow, and we don't know what that is. And so we at St. Mike's also did a lot of deliberate looking for people who wanted to take on something. And sometimes it was, a very short time, and sometimes it was a very extensive role. And it continues to be an approach I try to take, is giving people the space to really lead something, because it's so important. The other piece that you talked about, it's only chaos until you put a frame around it. And actually, prior to everybody getting on, I started to have a little bit of a conversation of how we're back in this stage, at least in Ontario right now, where we have all of these escalation levels or models of care. And we know we have to transition as we run out of space in our ICUs, essentially, right? And so many times those frameworks and models are set up with the when X happens, i.e. when we run out of ICU beds, we're going to have to start to triage. Like, that's as awful as a stage we have to go to. But the reality is that doesn't happen on a Thursday at noon. That happens over like hours and days, and it's almost like you find yourself there having hopefully planned for it. But what I find is that, like, I watch our tracking board all the time, and I'm constantly saying, are we out of beds? Are we out of beds? Okay, we're almost out of beds. Oh, wait a second. As I go and make the phone calls and we push through, I turn around and I'm like, oh, we're not out of beds anymore. And when do we actually switch? And as a physician leader, that is an uncomfortable space to be. But it's allowing yourself to be okay with that discomfort, because it otherwise becomes difficult to work with. And so it was more of a reflection on that sense that you've got to have those models, those stages, but acknowledging that there's a gray zone, and that you sort of move into them and you go back and forth a little and then you move into them. And what that means for me as a leader is I have to be very clear with the people that work with me, is that there's got to be some tolerance for that flexibility that we all have to have. Even though we have escalation 1A, B, C, and then escalation 2A and B, and then escalation level 3, one day we may be in A, B, and C, and then 2, and then back to 1A, and we all have to be okay with that, because that's our reality. And that's actually a hard part of leadership, because people want it to go from 1A to 1B to 1C, then to 2, then to 2A, 2B, and maybe if we could get it back to 1A, please, that'd be good.
Thank you, Carolyn. So listen, I'd love to hear from some of you. This is an interactive session. So, does anybody have any comments? We heard a lot of interesting ideas from Taslim, maybe some things that you're trying out in your own hospital with your own group in terms of managing COVID and really making, a cohesiveness of the group a priority. I've got a hand. Hold on. Who is that?
And
You can unmute. I can't. Somebody's hand is up.
Yeah, it's mine. I'll go ahead and unmute if you don't mind. I'm Erin O'Connor from UHN in Toronto, so just up the street from Carolyn, down the road from Humber. So I would really agree with the point that the clear and transparent and frequent communication in a time of crisis is what's needed. And I have to say that something that was a bit of a blessing and a curse for us at UHN was the group WhatsApp chat. As much as there were many evenings where I was really frustrated with it, you could get a very real sense of, as a leader of where the anxiety level was in the group. The more messages on the chat, the higher the anxiety level was. And there were certainly times where amongst the physicians in the group, they were kind of spinning out of control with some misinformation. And so even though it required almost constant monitoring, there were nights where I was responding to messages at midnight, and a few nights in the first wave where I woke up at 4 a.m. and checked messages and responded. By giving clear information and correcting some of the misunderstandings and letting people know what was actually kind of, as far as we knew at that moment, the truth organizationally, we were able to actually quell a lot of the anxiety in the group. It was exhausting, but it meant actually that a lot of the problems were dealt with fairly early.
Wonderful.
I'm not sure if anyone else did the same.
Thanks, Erin. Rod.
Just to tag on to that, it's such an important concept. It's such a good talk, Tasneem. Thank you so much. Great idea. I think I'm gonna steal it. But it's just so important along that WhatsApp thing. A similar thing happened, and sometimes I think some of the best leaders are in touch with the front line, but there is times where it's just overwhelming. Like you can't take that kind of energy or visceral energy. And sometimes what I've seen is that dancing back and forth of being in touch enough so you're not really, you do have a pulse of what's going on, but then protecting your own health, because sometimes it can be just overwhelming with that degree of anxiety. I know within our adult group, the person who was in charge had to just not be part of that group because it was just overwhelming, but then assign one of the deputies to be monitoring and to be able to liaison and create that ability, but then create a little bit of boundaries. And along the lines of the presentation, I think the best leaders are always trying to be in touch with and never lose touch of what the pulse of the front line is and what the culture is. And I think EQ is that evolving, that constant monitoring. And I agree right now, like more than ever, that those kind of videos of your team and having common thoughts are just so important. I wanted to show something that we did way in the beginning that wasn't that relevant in the summer, but is now becoming relevant again as the stresses are increased. Is it's pretty easy to do. I can't share. I don't know, Carol, if you can let me share. But I was going to say is if you just have everyone, if you take a picture of everyone in their mask, there's computer software that to create a mosaic, of our hospital, but then it's actually made up of the pictures of your team. So I'll just show it real quick.
You can screen share. There you go. Oh, neat.
Yeah. I created that. That's a picture of our hospital, but then each of the squares is each a member of our team in their PPE. Because I know years from now, when they look back, when they throw these masks away, it's going to be something for them to remember that we were in it together.
Neat. Great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I think, this is just going to generate some more discussion. And certainly if you want to revisit any of this stuff after our next speaker, you're welcome to do that. It's an open kind of forum for discussion and questions. So, if perhaps what we might do is move on with Carolyn, because I know that she was going to speak a bit on wellness as well. And I'll give you the floor. And Rod, Katrina wants to know what did you use to create your photo while Carolyn's getting her thing up? So maybe you can put that in the chat. Thank you.
Can you guys see my
Yes.
incredibly well space that we all want to try and be at right now, but we're not? So I think we all talk about wellness, and I think Tasneem talked a little bit about it not being about the cookies. And I think that we've talked a lot about that in all of physician wellness. And I think it's important to think of it within context of the pandemic. And I'm going to, similar to Tasneem, share a little bit of a model that I use. I use sort of two models, but I'm going to talk about one very quickly, but then the one that I use more on a day-to-day basis. And for whatever reason, and of course, COVID has caused a chaotic crashing down and burning of what we think of wellness right now. Wellness being about work-life balance. Well, there is no balance in the same way that we remember it a year ago, or now 14 months ago. And in fact, this is a picture of me the other day. It is representative of how I felt last Friday after the last announcements in Ontario. And some may have seen me on CBC, and you'll note that I took that and formed it into a certain amount of it. It ended up in a sort of maybe a bit more of a anger state. But there are moments as leaders where we have this, we then have to pull back and try to pull our hair back and become as confident and take the chaos and put it into framework, as Tasneem mentioned. But when we think about wellness and the people that work with us and that we work for and work for us, we really have to think about varying different models. This is a model that I use more globally when I think of our department, and I've used it as I think of department work overall, the IHI framework for improving joy at work, what matters to people. and understanding what the impediments are to those things that matter to them. Committing to really looking at it from a systems approach, acknowledging that often it's the big rocks, and that's why I have this photo in the bottom. I often find we can spend about 80% of our time, 95% of our time working on those little pebbles that get in the way without actually addressing those sort of big system rocks that it always comes back to. Often in emergency medicine, it's around our ability, I think, to spend time with the patients that we are wanting to care for. And so we get in the way with that, with flow, with EHR. We have a lot less human time in our frontline role than we got into medical school for. And so I think of those as big rocks that we have to try to keep addressing. And then using implementation and improvement science to do that. But in reality, when we get to pandemics, you got to have a quicker thing than a massive circle of wheel with 15 different things in it. And so I use a model that some of you may have seen from me previously in a variety of different ways. In addition to doing administrative work, I do research and learned this model from a group of elders and individuals who work in the Indigenous community. When I was working in Winnipeg, I'm just realizing I forgot to introduce myself, Kirsten. I'm Carolyn Snyder, I'm Chief of the Emerge at St. Michael's Hospital. Prior to working at St. Michael's Hospital, I worked in Winnipeg for 8 years, and there I did research as well as being an Emerge doc at Winnipeg Health Sciences, with a focus for youth who are affected by violence. I now continue to do research, but my focus is a little more broadly, not just people affected by violence, but also those experiencing homelessness and other areas of disadvantage.
They just thought you were some crazy street person from the photo you
I
put
know,
doing
exactly. As I hope people didn't take screenshots. So when I was in Winnipeg, I learned this model, and it is a model that we used in an intervention for young people affected by violence. But I've learned to use it when I think about my role as a leader of a group, that in order to feel whole and to feel to be able to truly have the agency that we all need to fulfill what we've gotten into in medicine to be caregivers, we really have to fill these buckets. And so a sense of belonging, a sense of mastery, a sense of independence, and a sense of generosity, and being able to act on all of those as a group is really important. And so when I talk about belonging, it really speaks to the idea that we're all in this as a team, and our role as leaders to ensure people feel like they belong, being invited to that table. Tasneem spoke about the 4 p.m. Visits that they had every single day. We definitely had a whole lot of in-person huddles in the emergency department daily. And we still do that. We try to, we're back to daily huddles again right now. But we also had regular daily Zooms for a while. Then they went to 3 times a week. Then they went to twice a week. Sometimes they were on a Sunday afternoon when things were really bad. And we still try to do regular Zoom meetings for our department, and then also separate ones for our emergency department. And these are our emergency medicine MDs. We also at St. Michael's Hospital have a space that is that we all belong to as MDs, and although it doesn't look like it is considered our offices, but we actually bring in food. We have a space where we belong and can spend time together to feel together. So when I notice people having difficulty, I often have to understand how they're belonging to the group. Do they feel disconnected? What it is about their belonging within our group that might be sort of out of sync. I also acknowledge that all of us belong not just to our group, but to our families at home. And so often when people are struggling at work, there's also that piece. And as a leader, understanding and respecting that we are much more than just who we are at work. And so I think that's a really important piece. Mastery, again, we spoke about the importance of deputizing leaders, or that concept that everybody who comes and is part of our group brings something to that group that is unique, and that is an important part for us, even when we're hiring, to think about what is it that that person's bringing to our group. And during this pandemic, that was a really key piece to ensuring our group was highly functioning. And independence is around making sure people take responsibility for their roles. And so what I mean by that was that there were times when people were so upset, it came out as anger, and it came out in ways that made it really difficult to work with. Not just from us as leaders. I think, already Aaron sort of spoke a little bit to how sometimes it can be hard to be the receiving end of that fear. Rod spoke a little bit to that as well. But the importance of acknowledging that we are professionals and we have a responsibility both to try and understand that as leaders, but also to set some sort of sense of boundaries of what is expected in terms of professional behavior. And finally, generosity. And in our group, it was really important to note that while we were on the receiving end of great generosity, especially in the first wave, that there were many, many people around us that were the unsung heroes. And one way this came out at St. Michael's Hospital was that it was actually initiated by two of our nurses out of a conversation, but participated in by our entire group, where they raised $40,000 for the shelter workers and the shelters in our neighborhood. And as we saw the increased numbers coming from groups, often even before an outbreak was noted by the Toronto Health, we were sending money to buy individually packaged meals and actually donations specifically to the shelters that we knew were struggling, as an acknowledgement and as a thank you for the hard work that we knew that many of the frontline workers, they themselves were doing, and the challenges that they faced. It was incredible to me to watch the success that initiative had on bringing our group together at some of the worst times. This is the same times that we were having 30 people from that shelter show up in our emerge within half an hour, was the time somebody else at the same time was acknowledging that the people at the front lines in that shelter were really under great strain. And it really helped us come together and say, we're all in this and we're just going to have to do it together. So finding those moments is incredibly important to not just function in a department, but our wellness, because you could tell that it gave people a sense of purpose in the midst of it all. I'm going to stop sharing there, because I do think, the conversation about wellness is important and topical. I look around this Zoom group, and I know many of you, although not all of you well, but I know that many of you have been active in this. So I'm really interested in some of the initiatives that have been taken on at other places.
Thank you very much. And I really appreciated your circle of courage model, especially. I like the application of that into a different setting. And Heather, I don't mean to put you on the hot seat, but I may have missed your hand in the last session. So certainly you would get the first opportunity, but I don't see your face, so I don't want to put you into a place if you're not able to.
Sure.
Here you go. Would you like,
Sure.
I'm sorry. And it's nice to see you, by the way. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while.
And I missed you. So go ahead, you've got the floor.
No, it just reminded me when they talked about the pictures, we came in one morning at work, halfway through this, probably the second wave, when people were like, are we going to have to do all those extra nights again, kind of situation, because we had backup person at night for a while. So, that's a bit challenging. Across an entire window was every staff member's name and a thank you in a heart.
No.
There was hearts like for every staff member in the department. It's still there.
That's great.
And this was months later. So I thought that initiative came from nursing, it came from physicians, whatever. But it really, it still is talked about frequently. And it's like a small thing, I think, but it was one of the things that really people talked about and felt good about together for quite a while. And it was a small thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's on the wellness, let's, we're in it together kind of thing. Yeah. And I honestly missed the first bit. I'm really sorry of the first presentation. But I don't know if you were talking about things that happened in the beginning. I think one of the things that we did, and I wasn't in this job, like I'm an interim site chief now, but I was not in the beginning of this. was that we kept waiting and waiting for direction. Like for simulation, we kept saying there's going to be simulation for this protocol, for the intubation protocol, for this and that. And at some point, two of us just looked at each other and we said, you know what, we're just going to send an email and see who wants to come in on Saturday. We're going to take the protocol, actually it was from MUHC. Like there is a protocol. So look, let's just borrow one. Let's just give it a go. And we said, well, there'll probably 7 or 8 people that show up on a Saturday morning. Over 40 people showed up in our little space. We had no idea what we were starting. We had no clue. And then we were able to build on that. And one of the people from ICU was there and said, look, can you come up to ICU? Because we're not even sure what we need to train, like in terms of, and it was not to details. We're talking, okay, I think we need to transfer from the OR to the ICU. I think we need to do transfer from just big picture stuff. And I think we were not in leadership position, but I think just saying, you know what, we just need to go. We can't wait for this. I think that was appreciated. And I think it brought the group, nursing staff, especially PABs, because they have to be involved in it, or orderlies, I guess, in English. I thought it was helpful. That's all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's great. They're great points. Somebody else has their hand up, and it's Elisa Fisher. Go ahead. You have to unmute yourself. We can't hear you.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I turned off the video, not the mute. I guess I have a question for Carolyn or Taslim or anyone in the group, really. So I'm one of the wellness leads in my Emerge department. And looking at Carolyn's graph around the stages based on the IHI framework, like we've, I think, done a pretty good job at surveying and figuring out like what matters and what's making people unwell. And so we have this repository of things, and really that picture you put with the rocks and the pebbles rang true, because there's some little things that we focus energies on, like, okay, all the otoscopes are broken, or people are really frustrated with parking, and we're making some inroads, but there's like big things that have identified and are recurring themes, and like I feel quite powerless to change. So now I find like I'm kind of spinning my wheels in that situation of like, Albert Einstein's definition of insanity, like doing the same thing over and over and expecting something to change, and it gets a bit frustrating. So I'm wondering, I saw some people nodding, or if people have any like similar experiences or suggestions. I realize it's probably not an easy answer, else maybe I would have figured it out by now. But when, like, because with wellness, I find like you don't really often have like a defined, like all the lines blur, and so you're in charge of making things better, but then don't have necessarily the clout to sometimes enact change. So sorry for my long little rant, but that's wondering if anyone has any experience or advice around that.
Thank you, Lisa. Eddie, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. One thought, and I've got to tip my hat to Huma, who leads our wellness hub. We were approached by our executive team, which is the site chiefs for 4 hospitals, assistant site chiefs, were approached by the wellness hub saying they wanted a seat at our table. We didn't normally have a wellness represented on our terms of reference. So just the idea, as wellness is gaining importance, that the voice of wellness is there as a partner, collaborator, overseeing everything that happens, making sure that we're addressing addressable priorities, at least at the departmental level, is I think has been very, very helpful. And even at the bigger hospital level, we have also made the case for why wellness is so important, as it is in all other departments, and that has brought some support our way. So I can't say it's going to solve parking problems, but maybe by making sure that executive team meets with someone who's got the wellness label or the wellness responsibilities can help make sure that key issues are addressed, perhaps.
That's a great point.
Can I oh, there's never mind.
Sorry, Huma, go ahead.
I didn't see hands up because I had a question for the group, but I think the other people should talk.
But Huma, I think, wanted to just follow on Eddie's mentioned her.
Yeah, Thank you so much, Eddie. I think at being, I guess now ex-wellness hub lead, I think one of the things that really allowed us to promote wellness or have that discussion around wellness was leadership buy-in. Like Eddie's a very big supporter of wellness initiatives, and that made it easy for us to, approach the executive and say, hey, can we have a member on this like important decision-making body for our department, and having somebody in leadership support that has been very instrumental. Other things that we've done is that we also had like a COVID working group, which we would meet fairly often, pretty much every week to talk about, COVID. What are we doing right now? What are going to be our recommendations as a department? What is the data showing? And I'm sure every department did that as well. And I was the wellness representative on that conversation every week, where I would say, hey, what my feel is that we really need to address the lack of PPE. Like that is a real conversation. So can we have a conversation about that? And then we had multiple other wellness initiatives, like with the COVID updates, we would do a 5-minute wellness at rounds as well. So it was addressing, that, what we're experiencing is grief, or just putting that language out there, starting that conversation in a formal, like recognized forum, right? Like grand rounds. I think that really allowed for a normalization of that conversation. I also have to say that I'm super excited that we'll talk about wellness, because I'm like, wellness is next week, but a huge part of leadership is wellness. So I love this conversation.
Thank you. Carolyn and Tasleem, I forgot to, Tasleem, circle back to you. Eddie had a little say, but there's 2 hands. I'm wondering if you would mind if we took them and then went over. Is that okay? Great. So we've got, I think it's David Switzer, is that right? And then Rod, it's you after that.
Hi, my name's Danica.
I don't know D. It says D Switzer and I haven't met you. What's your name?
My first name's Danica.
Hi, Danica. Thank you very much. Nice to see you. Nice to meet you for the first time.
I'm trying to, lower my hand. There we go.
Yeah.
So I guess I have a different experience because I'm very, very rural. So we're just 6 doctors in our group, and we don't really have an emergency department because everyone floats through it. And we don't have dedicated wellness people either at the hospital or at our family health team. But I think some things came through that were really good. Our doctor group, we sent out weekly chats, and we set up a messenger group so we could all communicate regularly. At the start of the COVID, and we still have it because we're still using it because Ontario's still in COVID now. The hospital has been pretty supportive. About every 2 months, they have lunches and ice cream sundae parties for everyone. So all the staff, the cleaners, nurses, the couple doctors that are around, everyone's invited. And at the family health team, it was difficult because we split into 2 groups. We didn't see each other face to face for about 5 months before we were all coming in on the same days. Lots of stuff was put on hold. And for our Christmas party, usually it's quite fun. Everyone gets together, we trade gifts. But in November, December, Ontario, I feel like we've been in lockdown most of the time. And that wasn't possible. So I actually went ahead with an outdoor party, and we were 16 people, and the allowable then was 25. So we put on our snowsuits, we had a fire in my backyard, and everyone came through, and everyone said it was so good to be there and to just do something normal, even if it was a bit unusual in snowsuits. So these are some of the little things we've done for wellness up here.
Thank you. Rod?
Yeah, just a quick comment about just to tie it a little bit together. And I know whom I mentioned that Eddie is very receptive, and we all work in different situations and in different scenarios and different levels of receptiveness. And I think part of emotional intelligence and leadership is strategic intelligence, to really understand when you're running into that roadblock, what is the thing that people are not quite connecting or seeing the importance of, because there's a disconnect between something the group feels important and what they want to support. And sometimes if you can kind of key in and figure what that is, there are teachable moments. There are some times that you tell people things, and there's sometimes you don't tell people things. And right now is a golden opportunity for wellness, because there's nobody in the pandemic that does not understand the importance of wellness right now. So it's a great opportunity to engage leaders, hospitals and whatnot, and the importance of wellness. So just tying those threads together.
Thank you. Taslim, you're gonna, and Carolyn, you can have the last words before we turn the session over to Eddie.
You
Anything?
said both of our names. Did you want me to go and then Caroline, is that what you said, or you wanted Caroline to wrap it up?
Carolyn can
No,
wrap.
I wasn't planning to wrap up. I think we should hear from Eddie and make sure we have lots of time because there's so much wealth of knowledge on this board that I want to learn from.
So Taslim, you get the last words to wrap this part up. It's kind of a continuation. So if there's anything you have to say.
I guess what I was thinking as the last, I think it was Rod who just made the last comment, was that we still have a long road ahead, because even as COVID numbers eventually will decline, I think our emergency departments will see sort of another wave, and that will be in individuals that present to the ED for support for their mental health, amongst other things. And so I think that resilience in this group is extremely important. And so we have to think of the wellness lens, not just through the pandemic, but through all of the time that will come after.
Thank you so much. It's very true. Okay, so we're on to our last speaker. We're doing well for time, and I'll hand it over to you, Eddie. We can't see your screen, Eddie, or hear you yet.
Can everybody hear me?
Now we can hear you, yes.
Yeah, sorry about that. And can you see my screen? Probably not.
Not yet. You need to share screen.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry, I can't, it doesn't seem like I can go to full screen mode, but will this do?
Yeah, sure.
Great. So Sir Winston Churchill's head was supposed to fly in because I was going to ask everybody who said never let a good crisis go to waste. But now that I'm in note mode or whatever this is, you see that's the case. So just to give you a sense, my little bit here is going to be more of a forward-looking. I mean, also the other presentations have been, but how it's really about how are we going to leverage what we've sort of been through to make potentially our future better. And it's great to see so many familiar faces on the call. Great to see Mel and Huma from Calgary. I'm the Joint Clinical and Academic Department head in Calgary, so we've got 4 sites, about 220 physicians, and honestly feeling a little bit like an imposter here because in fact in Calgary, our successful COVID response was led by my deputy department head for operations, Dr. Neil Collins, as well as great work by all of our 4 site chiefs and assistant site chiefs and nursing leadership, of course. So what I'm going to cover today is some remarkable reflections on what has transpired. And this crisis is like no other crisis. I mean, we've had mass casualty incidents, we've had floods and fires, but never have we gone to war as a specialty in a way where we didn't have the armor, and you don't know if you got shot until 2 weeks later. And it's incredible to me how you know, with SARS in the background, our team was able to, you know, just continue coming to work. Was I think a heroic effort right in and of itself, and has been alluded to. People are going to just spontaneously step up and do amazing things to help support the COVID effort, just like Heather Coombs described out of her hospital. I presume that's still St. Mary's. So I think it will have value for us if we tell stories from this experience going forward. And you know, one of the most key things I think that happened early on that I don't think it's been mentioned yet, is how we let older physicians off the hook right away when we knew the demographic profile of the infection. I mean, it seems maybe obvious right now, but the fact that, you know, we were letting physicians work in minor or not even come to work at all and cover for them. Brian Goldman tells a great story of how the overnight doc stayed on and took care of some of the early intubations because I didn't want to expose him to risk. So these things hopefully will become part of our story going forward, including at the operational level, what happened and how our persona, our predilection for badness, our desire to want to help each other, because of course, when your pager goes off and Dr. X needs you in the code room, we don't bat an eye, we go. And that came out in spades uh, during our experience, as did this new emphasis on gratitude, which also has never been so prominent as it has been. So I've shared a link in the chat window. A lot of what you'll find here on our COVID resource site, including the sim videos and all the resources that were developed that Huma mentioned, these were just spontaneous efforts from our group. I mean, maybe nobody was traveling, nobody had conferences, but people stepped up and offered their help with almost out having to be deputized or asked. It was just a spontaneous show of willingness to contribute and wanting to help each other. So what happened a few months ago is I had to present the departmental report to the City of Calgary zone leadership, all the department heads and all the leaders. And it's such a boring and dry 15-minute bit where I talk about our numbers and our publications and who's who in the zoo. And I just went rogue. I just wanted to tell our COVID story. And this is the first slide I showed. And by the way, if you're interested, and Rod knows this, Heather Patterson, one of our physicians, is a professional photographer and took some amazing pictures inside of the Foothills Emerge that have been featured in multiple media events. But I thought it's just important to remind those who didn't really see what was happening on the inside. I mean, granted, this is almost certainly true of COVID units and the ICU, but look at all these things that happened to us. How much sleep we lost, the uncertainty we've mentioned, the challenges of working with PPE and not getting the history that we need to do good patient care, and the heartbreak of seeing 30-year-olds with chewed up lungs and SATs of 70. And then, oh my gosh, how things changed on a dime with regards to how we do things and protocols, and clearly burnout is an epidemic. And early on when it was really quiet, we were hearing a lot of guilt too. Guilt that we had jobs, guilt that it was fairly quiet while the world thought we were, especially in first wave, thought we were drowning in patients. So it harmed us in so many ways. But think about this. It also brought us together and made us stronger, and we hit back with these things. You know, um, they're all listed there. I believe our teams were exceptionally brave, adaptable. We transformed our communication and rounds methods to ways that are arguably far superior now. Thanks to the Wellness Hub and the creation of a whole bunch of videos that you can see on our website too, gratitude was contagious, as was kindness. And I guess kindness exemplified in letting our older docs off the hook. And as I mentioned, all these other things that made us tougher and made us better. So what I did show though is, I think it's, if you can, why don't you, it might be worthwhile to show how exactly the Emerge was the COVID hotspot. And Taslim did this to a large extent, but I was able, using our data, to count up how many patients we suspected COVID in, and this is already a few months old, what proportion of our visits that was, how many admissions went through our door, and how many deaths actually occurred within our four walls. And I think that's important information for our brothers and sisters in the house of medicine to know as we go forward and discuss various challenges that we face and look at ways of working together better. You probably all saw something like this. During wave one, we had the admitting services were swooping down to take patients upstairs. At least this was, I mean, maybe this is not widespread phenomenon, but our length of stay for admitted patients, our time to consultant response, our decision making by consulting services and admitting services, it all dropped sharply. Of course, multifactorial, we had fewer patients, there were lots of empty beds upstairs, but it just speaks to the feasibility of how the boarding issue can improve. That doesn't mean it needs a pandemic to do so, but the precedent is there, and it's not it's not about the other blames that come to play when it comes to why our wait times are so long and why we're often full of admitted patients, but it can show that the system can come together if need be. And so I mentioned the video, and you see Huma there in the top left. We had individually made leadership videos put together and provided to us, and a general one as well. And just like the names and the hearts that Heather mentioned, these were a real bolster to our spirit in a time that we really needed it. And then the last, going back to that meeting at the Calgary zone, I showed this video, which Rod will recognize. It's the docs that rock under pressure. And again, that would be the first time a department head ever showed a YouTube video at an annual report meeting. And the feedback was great. It was phenomenal. I had nothing but good comments, but I was also clearly admonished for not providing a mascara warning because many of the people who were just found themselves that they had to turn off their videos because they were just so moved by Rod's work and the under pressure video. So that's it for me. I guess the take home message is that let's think future. I mean, we're still in wave 3, but let's think about how the political capital, the goodwill that we gained during the pandemic can translate to make the care we provide for patients in the future even better. And I will go back to questions or open it up to Tasleem and Carolyn for any comments, or Kristen, of course.
No, that's great. Tasleem or Carolyn, do you have the?
That was great, Eddie. The one thing that I don't know how this resonates with the group, but something that I thought about when you were talking about guilt was also guilt as a leader that you're not in scrubs all the time. That's been a hard one for me because so much of my role, especially now that I'm on this provincial table, is actually not in scrubs. And then you feel like you're not there sort of in the trenches with your team, and the rational part of you knows that the work that you're doing is important, but the instinctive part of you just doesn't sit right somehow, and you have to figure out how to come to grips with that. So that's just sort of my reflection as I heard you talking that I'll share.
Thank you.
It's interesting, Tasleem, that you say that, because I've had that too, and then I find myself like I drop my shifts somewhat, and then I find these shifts where I end up doing admin well on shift, which is just terrible. And then people are like, just go do it. And I've had a few of those where then I'm like, I think it's time for me to step back a little. So I've had the flexibility in my group to have some flexibility on shifts that way. I think the other piece, Eddie, is we have benefited from some of the flow work that we had been pushing for prior to as well. And actually Tasleem's well known in the Ontario area for the work around operation centers up at Humber. And so we're very close to, in the midst of all of this, launching our own operation.
Oh no.
To sort of pull the levers where they need to go, because we've learned how important it is to have that agility, to have people using the data to decide how things go in which way and who, What I've also been struck by in having sort of a bit more line of sight and a bit more resource to look at flow, acknowledging how important it's been through this, how what we've often thought are the big rocks, that sometimes those big rocks are actually really low hanging fruit. So for us, sometimes it's porters and EVS, so cleaners. Like, it is incredible to me how much delay flow through our departments are related to that. But we've really acknowledged the importance of cleaners in this last year and how important they are to our teams. And being able to highlight those through data has been incredibly important for us at St. Michael's Hospital. I'm interested, if you don't mind me, Kristen, asking the group what they've seen change over the last year in their own hospital and emergency department that they expect to see or hope to see long term.
Any hands?
Julian, something must have changed.
Oh, Erin, go ahead. Erin, sorry.
I was going to say, it's a kind of, I was thinking about this when Eddie was talking about, showing the people in the house of medicine. I think that one of the things that has been really important for us at UHN, because we are such a transplant and cancer heavy organization, I think emergency medicine was often an afterthought. And I think that this pandemic has really moved us more to the forefront of the conversation and allowed us more insight into decision-making, more input into decision-making at a higher hospital level. And so hopefully that will will be maintained going forward.
Julian, thank you.
Well, if Carolyn asked, then I suppose I should answer. I think one of the things, and one of the things that I noticed and hope persists is that our group, I think, had been kind of locked into a pretty steady way of doing things that was fairly rooted in tradition and not so much rooted in innovation. And this really galvanized the group to begin to become actively re-engaged in sort of charting our own destiny and moving things forward, irrespective maybe of what we felt that leadership was willing to commit to. And we got voices. So you always know in your group, there's sort of that handful of people, either it's the keeners that have always been keen or the new ones, or there's people that are just always going to step up. And we found that there was people coming out of the woodwork that you never really would have guessed would be willing to jump onto something and really commit to being part of it. And this showed us a whole new group of people that are super engaged. And 18 months in, certainly some of that engagement has waned a little bit, but there's still a wide degree of enthusiasm for trying to make things happen and to agitate for meaningful change. So that's been our experience.
Thank you for sharing. Kirk McGee? I lost you.
Oh, there I am. Sorry, I was on mute. I'm Kirk McGee. I'm the department head at Dalhousie, and certainly, in Nova Scotia, our experience with COVID, we've been blessed and haven't had nearly the impact that other provinces had had. But probably the biggest change we've seen is that initially back in March and April, for the first time, I saw the whole hospital system pivot as a single unit. And I can tell you, in the first 6 weeks, I talked to more people in the organization than I had in the preceding 3 years. It was unreal. And things changed very quickly. We set up new units, we changed protocols, and everyone was acting, as a single organization instead of a whole bunch of different departments and divisions. But one of the ways I think we've been able to translate that change, into the post-COVID world. It has been, when we look at, probably the biggest threat to emergency medicine has been access and flow. It naturally lends itself to the question, if we can change this much for COVID, why can't the organization change to address other, significant systemic issues? And through the work of people like Dave Petrie, who's on this call, and Sam Campbell, who really set the stage around access and flow, we've been able to leverage some of the changes around COVID into meaningful changes around access and flow, and getting, buy-in from senior leadership, and hopefully moving forward, we'll be able to sustain that kind of engagement at the senior level in the hospital.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. We've got Heather next.
Yeah, I would say some of the lessons, like hopefully we'll keep some of the lessons learned. That would be one big thing, because I remember reading everything that was written about SARS pretty much right away, all the reports and so on, and realizing there were so many lessons learned at the time that we hadn't applied. And we just really hope this time we go forward that we'll keep some of the lessons we've learned this time. And I would think we were so nimble, like I think all of us everywhere, we had this incredible access all of a sudden. We'd speak to the engineers, the architects. We couldn't get like a decon set up in our hospital, but in 2 weeks we could convert the garage, get the plexiglass up. If we had a good design, everybody was on board. It was a phenomenon, an absolute phenomenon. So I think maintaining those contacts, like we can maintain that, maintain those relationships that we built out of need. And then I think as we go forward, I think those can be hugely beneficial in everything, like exactly leadership, technical, everything, to help us with flow and every aspect of running a department.
Knock on wood. Absolutely. Mike Parsons.
Hi, so I'm Mike Parsons. I'm the academic chair in St. John's, Newfoundland. And again, similar to what was just said, we've been extremely lucky here. I think today we had maybe 3 new cases, but 4 recovered. So that kind of level. So thanks to everybody else who's on the call, because we are doing quite well and definitely not taking the brunt of things. What I wanted to say was things seemed to change fairly quickly in the department when they needed to, with respect to corridor care, for one thing, disappeared. So we had corridor beds. We used to have corridor beds nearly out to the ambulance bay, 12 of them, which made up a lot of our department, a fair number of beds in the department. They've disappeared. They've not been allowed to come back just because of infection control, of course. So if they could stay away, that'd be great. Just infection control itself, of course, the number of influenza cases have absolutely bombed out since everybody's been wearing their PPE and masks and appropriately washing their hands, which we should, of course, do in the first place, but I guess we didn't so well. And another thing that was just mentioned as well was just coordination with the upstairs crowd, the administrative people. Things just seemed to move along when they needed to happen, when they absolutely needed to happen. Why couldn't they happen a couple of years ago with respect to flow again and just procedures and policies in the hospital? Don't know, but I guess when they needed to happen, they did. So hopefully that communication and understanding will continue within the hospital. Those are the main things for us.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Is there anybody else who'd like to comment? Oh, Erin's got a cute little one. 2. Oh my gosh. Twins? Are they twins? No. Oh, wow. Cute.
Sorry, no, they're 2 years apart. I'm not supposed to be up here right now, but anyway.
That's all wellness. There you go. 2 bundle of wellness right there. Well, I'm just going to, I'll take the floor for a minute because this is an important piece of information that I do want to convey. Some of what we're doing at CAPE to provide leadership in COVID certainly has been, I think, really galvanized the organization and created a real community. And it's maybe the silver lining of having this virtualness that we've all had to adhere to. There's Sarah with her her children. Hi. And that is that, you know, all of a sudden we can gather and we can do this on a regular basis. And so we really had a lot of wonderful people, you know, Rod Lim and Judy and Eddie and Carolyn and everybody here come to the table and show their best at our national ground rounds. And we also have a really robust COVID resource page on our website. And then, you know, we've done a lot of work around, you know, equity, diversity, and inclusion and so forth. And but one area that I've been really committed to also as president of CAPE is supporting our rural and remote colleagues who do a lot of emergency medicine in their practice. And one way that I think that we can continue to support them and also the rest of our colleagues nationally is through a new initiative that we just launched, and that is for national licensing. So if you don't already know, we put it out in Cape Connect this morning or yesterday, but there's a petition and we're encouraging people to sign it, and we will take it to the relevant stakeholders. But this is not really a new initiative, and there's a lot of support from organizations across Canada to provide sort of a disaster license for doctors and nurses to travel and support other healthcare providers where healthcare is needed the most, so that Canadians can get the best care that they can get and need. And I happen to also work for the Red Cross now, and we're sending 24 intensive care nurses into Toronto from other provinces. And this is really, you know, something that we're pushing for, is the ability to allow healthcare workers to do that. So Heather says, can we include paramedics in this, please? Absolutely. So the idea is that I'll be contacting each of these organizations with the petition and with the consensus statement that just came out from CAPE, and asking them if they would like to back it so that we can see if we can move ahead on this. And I think, you know, that's something that's important going forward, because hopefully it'll have a lasting effect where when we have communities that need extra healthcare resources, Eddie just put the link in the chat, that we can maybe deploy healthcare workers. And certainly as we go forward, and we know that there's a lot of burnout, and we're seeing a lot of people leave medicine and nursing. You know, the future of all of this is going to be an interesting time. And I think wellness and mental health is going to be paramount for everybody and your teams, and as leaders of your teams, to be thinking of that. So it's been a good conversation. We just have a couple minutes left. So before I do my closing remarks, can I invite anybody else to add to the conversation?
I'll just do a quick blurb for next week, which is on wellness, but I'm so happy that so much of our topic was on wellness this time. Huma and I are very excited about next time. And we're just going to let you know that we're going to really try to engage you to find things that are very interesting and important to you. And if you can think of things that you really want to hear about beyond what you were able to put in the Excel spreadsheet, please don't hesitate to email us. We want to make that session as interactive and as useful to you as possible.
Great. And Doug, Doug, you have your hand up. You're absolutely welcome. Go ahead.
Yes, just another plug for session 4 as well. We've asked you to send your kind of problem cases, challenges to us, because we're going to have an open discussion and also a journal club. So just a reminder for that, please send them to Caroline or myself as we prepare for that. So thanks.
Thank you. So I'll just turn it over to our speakers for closing remarks, and then I'll finish. And I actually wanted to talk about photos. I wanted to do a screenshot of everybody once we're done. So, but just before you leave, and we can, if you don't mind, if you feel comfortable turning on your camera, we'll do a couple screenshots for this leadership group and share that out. Okay, Carolyn, you can go first.
I just wanted to make one comment around leadership in the time of pandemic. I think one of the things we've all learned is that being a leader in this time has taken a toll on all of us. And we've talked about wellness today, but it also has meant times where we have to push boundaries we may not have wanted to or felt comfortable doing. And for some people here, they're pretty senior leaders. For some, they're sort of entering into the leadership space. I really reflected over the last week how fortunate I am to be working in a place where I felt safe pushing boundaries. and that I, you know, have been able to call up VPs in my organization and tell them why I was frustrated or why I disagreed. And I never felt unsafe doing that. That I felt safe going on CBC and saying some pretty stark things. And so for those that are in junior positions or and have the space as they think about leadership opportunities, to really make sure that when you choose opportunities that you can be leading in a space, should you ever get to a circumstance like we've been in this last year again, where you can actually allow those words out and allow that space to allow those actions to have. And I think that's an incredibly important thing that I've been able to reflect upon even in the last few weeks. So
thank you. Tasneem?
Thank you, Carolyn, for those comments on psychological safety. I would just sort of, I think I'm going to pick up on the last thing that we were talking about in terms of, you know, necessity is the mother of invention, and how is it that we could do all of this stuff that we could never get done before. And I think that for each one of us, it's so important that as we do get to a point, maybe not right now, because it's hard to catch even a breath, but not at the end because it'll be too late. But as we start to see things sort of entering that slow burn, to start asking our groups, what do we want to keep? What do we want to change? And what do we need to keep? What do we need to change? And what does it not matter if we don't lose? That sentence didn't come out right, but what will it not matter so much for if we don't lose? Again, that didn't come out right, but I think you get where I'm getting at. And we need to start thinking that way so that we're not then asking for stuff when it's too late. And so we don't lose all of the momentum, the leverage, and we're not sort of dialing back on the milestones that we've achieved.
Super. That's great. Thank you. Eddie, give that.
I had the chance to listen to a good chunk of last week's session, and a couple of things resonate with me now looking at all together. Firstly, I just want to thank Tasneem and Carolyn for allowing me to learn so much from your experience and your insights, and from all of you. It's been extremely valuable, and because it really it is a two-way street here. And yeah, I think that I had something else, but it just escapes me right now. But thanks.
Well, thank you. And talking about thank yous, I just would like to send a thank you to Carol Ann and Shanna and Lynn from Cape, and Doug St. Clair for spearheading this leadership initiative. It's really actually very exciting, and it's really nice to see all of you. So, you know, I think we span the entire country, and so it's really exciting for me to see that. And so can we just I'll do a screenshot. If you want to turn your cameras on and smile, and then I'll send this to Carol Ann, and we can send this out to oh, this is great. Okay, so I'm going to do a screenshot twice because we're two gallery views on mine. 1, 2, 3. Nice. Okay, and then I have another one. Here we go. This is fun. And this will go down in history. There you go. Thank you, everybody. Wonderful work today. And it's really a pleasure. We're right on time. So we'll give you your 1 minute back. And I really enjoyed this, and I look forward to the next session. And thank you again. Have a great afternoon. Okay. Great.